Welcome to our preview and predictions for the second biggest major in darts, the World Matchplay. The action begins this weekend at the iconic Winter Gardens in Blackpool, so we're delighted to be joined by former major winner, commentator and Sporting Life columnist Paul Nicholson, and alongside him we've got Sporting Life's resident darts expert Chris Hammer. They're here to run us through the draw and hopefully predict the eventual champion. Now, firstly, Paul, you were responsible for making this draw on Monday after the Players' Championship event. Which of the seeded players have struck you off their Christmas list this year?
Quite a few, actually. I think Adrian Lewis initially is thinking, what have you done to me, giving me the former champion Michael van Gerwen and three-time world champion, but I don't think there's any fear there for him. But some of the other draws, like Luke Humphries and the likes of Joe Cullen, might not be speaking to me for at least another couple of weeks.
Right, tell you what, let's get cracking. The format of this show is simple. We're going to get through each quarter of the draw and pick who will come through each one before predicting the final and eventual winner. In the first quarter then, defending champion Peter Wright gets his campaign underway against Madars Razma, but his potential threats in this quarter are the 2019 winner and former housemate of his, Dimitri van den Berg, who of course he beat in the final last year, as well as Jonny Clayton. Krzysztof Ratajski is in there as well as a major contender. So Paul, how do you see this one panning out?
It's a difficult quarter for Peter Wright. It's been a strange old year for him. He's had some health issues. He hasn't been playing at the same sort of level as some previous seasons, but over the last few days his form has been good enough, in my opinion, to worry all of the threats. Dimitri is going to be a threat in this quarter. Ratajski is always going to be a threat, but he's not at the same level as last year. But Jonny Clayton will be the biggest threat for me in this section. It's difficult for the number one seed because he's got to contend with the 8th and 9th seeds in his quarter, which makes it very difficult for the top guy. But I think he's going to come through this quarter anyway.
Okay, Chris?
Yeah, it's really tough for Peter Wright. He's 13-8 favourite, but I'm going to go with Jonny Clayton because, I mean, it's odd that he hasn't won a title this year. His first final was just the other night against Brendan Dolan. But he obviously topped the Premier League table, showed that amazing consistency that we know he had over the last sort of 12 months or so. And his average of 97.27 this year is really high. You know, it's in the top 5 of everyone this year. So he's still got, I think, the titles thing. I think when he's there at Blackpool, I think his big stage sort of presence now. I was going to ask Paul, actually, he hasn't got a good record at Blackpool, but really this is only his second appearance since becoming a major winner, really, isn't it?
Yeah, he got his first win in the match play 12 months ago, but didn't come through round 2. It's likely that at some point he's going to have a very good match play, but he may have to do it in a very different quarter to this. There's a lot of threats there, and I just think that Peter Wright, because of the experience of making multiple finals and of course winning last year, I think that's why he's more likely to come through this quarter.
Is a player like him then his confidence knocked when he sees the draw and he maybe sees that it's not as good a chance as he would have liked, particularly because he's in such decent form?
I don't think Jonny Clayton fears anybody because, like Chris said, he topped the Premier League table before the playoffs. So he was taking out these elite talents all of the time, including Peter Wright. But this is a very different format. You're talking about 1st to 10, and then when you get towards the quarterfinals, it's 1st to 16. You've got to have experience of doing that under the lights, otherwise you are going to get found out.
Okay, well, let's move on to quarter 2 then, and it's widely dubbed as the quarter of peril. Of course, it's headlined by Michael van Gerwen, who has won more titles than anyone this year with 6, but there are the likes of Adrian Lewis, Joe Cullen, Damon Heta, James Wade and Luke Humphries for him to contend with in this group. How do you see this one panning out?
Toss some balls in the air and see what falls, but we look really deep into this one. Obviously, Van Gerwen against Adrian Lewis is a blockbuster game. Only one of those can go through to round number 2. But I feel for Martin Lukeman making his debut in this quarter because it's, well done, Martin, but welcome to the match play. This is what it's like for you. Humphries, what a year he's having. 5 titles. He hadn't won a senior title until early February, but now he's got 5 of them, and he's winning in front of big audiences as well on multiple occasions. I sneakily think that Humphries is going to come through this. He's going to be battle-hardened after this first game if he comes through against Nathan Aspinall, and I think there's nobody he's going to fear coming through this quarter. But there's going to be a lot of people going home early from this quarter, which is a good sign for the person who comes through it.
Chris, it's a scary looking.
Well, it is. I mean, if you look at the stats on the screen, they've won about, all these players together, about what, 15 titles combined just in this quarter this year. My tip of the last quarter, Jonny Clayton, his career kicked off because of the World Cup, didn't it, really, you could say. And I think Damon Heta is in this group, and he recently won the World Cup with Simon Whitlock. It finally gave him that feel of kind of winning a major, although it's a team event. And I really fancy him. He's been outstanding this season. His average of 97.99 is second only to MVG. And he's really believing in himself now, isn't he? You'll know him well as the Australian connections. And
he's played more matches on the floor and on the European Tour stages throughout the season than anybody else. He's hitting more 180s than anybody else. And his likelihood of a 180 in every leg is only second to Dirk van Dijvenbode, an incredible scorer. But he hasn't got the same sort of match play experience as some others. I'm looking for the hot winners this year, the guys who've got the knack of getting over the line. That's why I've gone for Humphreys, but this quarter is going to be unbelievable drama.
Do we think whoever comes out of this quarter then is favourite, maybe?
They're definitely going to feel that way. I don't think the winner is going to come from this quarter, but they're going to make the final.
Okay. Right, well, let's drop in to quarter three then. And Gerwyn Price is the favourite here, but he's only reached the quarterfinals here twice before, and that's in 7 attempts. And you could argue that he's not really in the best of form, especially after what we've seen over the last few years. But it's probably fair to say that this third quarter is the easier quarter. Do you fancy him to make it through?
There's a lot of frailty in this quarter. You look at Jose de Sousa, the 7th seed, which is the corresponding top seed to Gerwyn Price. Jose is not doing great things this year, so he's going to feel a little bit fragile. I think the danger in this quarter is Dave Chisnell, because over the last month he's starting to figure some stuff out. He's starting to put in some big averages. Those 180s are coming back. But Price, all of his good stuff in 2022 came earlier in the season, winning the International Darts Open in February, winning a Pro Tour event shortly after, and having a blockbuster night in the Premier League in Belfast where he hit 2 9-darters. But that was a long time ago. Since then, he hasn't done a great deal, and he's taken a few tournaments off coming into this. I just get the feeling that maybe a fresh Price is a good price, but maybe not as likely as someone like Dave Chisnell.
I think he could surprise us, though, in this. It's full of surprises.
He is full of surprises. That's one of the reasons why some people don't like him, because he doesn't do things the way that people think he should. But he knows his body. He knows that the injuries are out the way now. He wants to do whatever he wants to do, and he's not going to let anybody stop him. But I just get the feeling that Blackpool is a very hard box for him to tick this year.
Chris, I know you're a fan of Dave Chisnell and Gerwyn Price.
Yeah, I mean, you make completely valid points at Gerwyn Price. I think his average this year is 2 points lower than it was at this time last year. So there's something that hadn't been right since those amazing couple of months of the season when he went 9-dart crazy, didn't he? But he did average 117 against Martin Schindler in the World Cup.
And look who he's playing in round one. That was his highest ever televised average in the World Cup. Admittedly, it was only first to 4 legs. This will be first to 10. But that will give Price a lot of fire coming into this to try and do exactly the same to the little German like he did in the World Cup.
Yeah, and I think that's what he'll need. I think once he gets going, we could see the real Price come back. He'll be fired up for it. He knows he's been in doldrums. It sounds disrespectful, doesn't it, to say this quarter is a weaker one. It's not. I don't think it is disrespectful to say that, because when you look at the players and the form and the averages, it is fair based on what we've seen.
I'm afraid so. It's just the way it is. And we've got former champion Rob Cross in there taking on Chris Dobey. No disrespect to Rob, but he hasn't won this year. Even in a bad season for Price, he's still won twice.
Sure.
Yeah, I think some people might fancy a little flutter on Schindler, might they, at 20-1 to win the quarter, just because if he gets past a rusty Price, and we have seen some good stuff from him this year.
Schindler has posted some sickening numbers the last couple of years. He's a different player now, making his debut. It'll be interesting to see how he adapts to the heat, because it's going to be over 30 degrees in Blackpool this weekend. So if you can't handle the heat, get out of the kitchen.
And there's no aircon in that Winter Gardens, I can tell you.
Oh,
No.
It's very hot.
You can't put air conditioning on when the dart players are on the stage, because it blows the darts everywhere. So you have to have it as a placid atmosphere. And if you want air conditioning, different room.
Sure, yeah. Chris and I worked in there a couple of years ago and I melted. Absolutely melted. Right, let's move on to quarter four then. And Michael Smith headlines this one ahead of his former mentor, Gary Anderson. But could the cult hero that is Andrew Gilding spring a surprise here for Bully Boy? He's been in fantastic form, hasn't he, Paul?
He really has. He's posted a personal best average in the last 7 days of over 118. You have to be an amazing player to do that. But if you think that's a flash in the pan, you'd be wrong. Over the last 2 months, he's been playing extremely well on the stage and on the floor. Came perilously close to a title within the last week as well. Nobody wants to play this guy. And I was saying this during the draw. When Andrew Gilding was pitched against Michael Smith, you just think, this is a bad draw for Michael Smith. But I still think he's going to come through it.
Okay, Chris?
Yeah, I think he'll come through it. It's that purple patch of winning the 5 titles, and when he won that last Premier League regular season night, that really got the monkey off his back, didn't it? Because I think he was going to be a bit embarrassed being the only one to miss out. But he's just been another player since then. Got over that UK Open final defeat. He's put that in the back. But we just need to see him win a major. He needs to win a major. It's going to keep bothering him. People are going to keep asking him about it.
How close do you think he is?
He couldn't be much closer, could he?
I think he's as close as ever. He won in the United States in Madison Square Garden. After winning that regular Premier League night, he's won Pro Tour events, quite a few of them over the course of a month. And his form has continued. Over the last week, his form has been a bit sporadic, but he'll be all right with that. And coming into this, he will fancy his chances. He's been to the final before. We have to talk about the Blackpool factor. If you've done it there before, you will fancy your chances if you're on form, and he is.
Well, Paul, you've been there. How important is confidence in a major final?
Massive. When he was in that major final at Blackpool against Rob Cross, he gave him an 8-0 lead. You can't do that. He made it a very competitive final, but he's learnt a lot since then. He seems to get out of the blocks a lot better now, and he's got a lot more experience after suffering 2 World Championship final defeats. I think he's more ready to win than ever, but he has to do it. We can talk about it as much as we want, but he's the one who's got to do it.
I've got to draw your attention to what an amazing second round match we could have. Michael Smith versus Dirk van Dijvenbode, the 180 machines, because they're both hitting them for fun. And I think if that happens, the bet you want for there is Smith to win and Dijvenbode to hit most 180s. You might get some good little price on that, but that's one to look out for if that tie happens. And then lower down, Daryl Gurney to cause an upset against Gary Anderson, because he's got a good TV record against him, hasn't he?
Yeah, really good TV record against him in Premier League, Champions League, you name it. He's beaten Gary Anderson in it. And Gary has not been at his optimum this season, and Gurney's been bubbling under the surface, so maybe Gurney would be a sneaky favourite in that one for me.
Just feel a bit unusual to be talking about a tournament like this and not having Gary Anderson up there as one of the favourites.
Hasn't won a tournament for a while, a good 2.5 years now. And there are rumours that maybe his retirement is imminent, but that's entirely up to Gary. He is still a top 10 player at number 6 in the world, but he's defending ranking money from 2 years ago. He made the final and lost to Dimitri van den Berg, and he's defending final money in the World Championship at the end of the year, so his ranking could plummet if he doesn't do anything in the next 6 months. So there is pressure on him.
Okay, right, let's move on. Who do we think is going to win the tournament then? So, our predicted semi-finals are, Paul, you've gone with Peter Wright versus Luke Humphries and Dave Chisnell taking on Michael Smith. Who wins these semi-finals?
I think that Michael Smith will win against Chisnell in a semi. I think that is the perfect game for Blackpool, because you've got Dave, who's from Morecambe, originally from St Helens, which is where Michael Smith is from. It's a northwest derby in the northwest of England. I think that would be a blockbuster semi, possibly won by Michael Smith. I'm going to go for him. And the next one is really hard for me to call. I think that Humphries has a great record in semi-finals. It seems to be the right time for him to play. And I fancy he's going to get through against the number 1 seed, cause a bit of an upset there, and would see Michael Smith versus Humphries in the final. Okay
then, Chris, you've gone for Jonny Clayton to take on Damon Heta and Gerwyn Price versus Michael Smith. Who reaches the final there? Well, then who's going to win?
Well, Paul's predicted finals 50-1, the Humphries-Smith final. I do like the idea of a Smith-Chizzy semi-final, though, because there wouldn't be a dry eye in the house if either of them won it, because they both haven't won a major. But, yeah, so my ones, I'm torn. Damon Heta, Jonny Clayton. Jonny Clayton just knows how to do it. Heta doesn't, but I'm going to go with Clayton. And then Smith as well. I just feel everything about Smith is just going in the right direction. That's only 25-1 if anyone wanted to be bold. And given the two, the romantic in me wants Michael Smith to win it. I think nothing against Jonny Clayton, but we just want Michael Smith to win it and then banish that. You don't want what's happened to Chizzy all these years later and he still hasn't won one. It's just not right. But I just think Jonny Clayton, with his when he gets going, he just beats anyone, and there's no nerves. He doesn't have nerves. He just seems to.
It's almost like he doesn't care, but he does care.
Yeah.
And that's a very dangerous mindset for all of his opponents.
Especially someone like Smith, who does care to win that first one.
And now that Jonny Clayton has got the ability to win a tournament where it's 1 game per day, a lot of these majors are playing 1 game a day up until the very last day, where you have to play 3 or maybe even 4. But he's won the World Grand Prix last year against Gerwyn Price in the final, and he won 1 game a day. So now that he knows he can do that, he's probably going to earmark the match play as his next to tick off the list. But I don't think he's going to do it, but I wouldn't be surprised if he did.
Okay then, chaps. Darts on the table. Who do you fancy to win?
Michael Smith.
Chris?
Jonny Clayton.
Lovely one-word answers. That's exactly what I like to say. Well, that is it. The heat is well and truly going to be on at Winter Gardens during the World Matchplay. And don't forget, head over to sportinglife.com/darts throughout the matchplay for daily tips, interviews, roundups and statistics, and for lots more from these two.